Hello, my name is Naomi, and this is our West Nile virus research project. I will begin by talking about the causes and transmissions of the virus. Next, Shannon will talk about the effects of the virus, and last but not least, Evelyn will describe the treatments and the preventative care and the risks of the virus. So I'm going to begin by talking about how West Nile virus is one of the leading causes of mosquito-borne diseases in the United States. It is maintained in a bird-mosquito-bird transmission cycle. When a mosquito bites an infected bird, the virus enters the mosquito's bloodstream and eventually moves into its salivary glands, which it could then infect another host by biting an animal or a human. The virus is passed into the host's bloodstream where it may cause serious illness. West Nile virus has been rarely spread through other modes of transmission besides a mosquito bite, such as exposure in a laboratory setting, blood transfusion or organ transplant, and then mother to baby during pregnancy, delivery, or breastfeeding. I'm going to show you a picture of the transmission cycle of West Nile virus. You can see here just the cycle between the mosquito and the bird. And then once the mosquito is infected with the virus, it can always infect an incidental host, such as a human or a horse. They're also known as a dead-end host, meaning they cannot develop high enough concentration of the virus to then transmit it to another mosquito through a bite. So after about a week of after biting an infected bird, a mosquito can transmit the virus to other birds through a bite, whereas a host won't. An incidental host won't. They won't be able to transmit the virus because they won't have high enough levels of the virus in their bloodstream. But there could be vertical transmission through mother to fetus or horizontal transmission through blood transfusions or organ transplants, which are both very rare forms of transmission. Now to get to the mechanism, once bitten, the virus enters through a person's tissue through the mosquito's saliva and begins multiplying in the keratinocytes and immune cells, otherwise known as the Langerhans cells, in the epidermis of the host, which is known as the early phase. In the Langerhans dendritic cells, the virus enters the cell through receptor-mediated endocytosis, in which the virus exploits specific cell surface receptors to bind and enter the cell. In the endosome of the cell, the viral particles mature and the new virions are released into their single-stranded positive RNA genome into the cytoplasm of the cell, marking the beginning of the viral replication. After enough replication, eventually the virus then continues to multiply enough to enter the bloodstream, which is known as viremia, which basically just means there is virus in the blood of the host. Not only does the virus infect the bloodstream, but also gains access to the regional lymph nodes and to the spleen, also just known as the lymphatic system. This is known as the visceral organ dissemination phase, which is the second phase of the infection of the West Nile virus. The first stage being the early phase, just involving the virus entering the tissue of the host. Also, after the visceral organ dissemination phase, in some rare cases, the virus can develop into a third phase known as the central nervous system phase, which will infect the brain and the spinal cord and can be fatal. So West Nile virus did not originate in North America. It was actually first discovered in 1937 in a country called Uganda. And was thus endemic in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia before it even touched the U.S., which wasn't until 1999. And over just 5 years, it spread across the entire country, including 35,000 cases, 1,400 of which were fatal. So in all, West Nile virus can be very minimal or fatal, just depending on the host in which phase the virus develops into. I will now end the causes and transmission and introduce Shannon, who's going to talk about the effects of the West Nile virus. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Shannon Duffy, and as Naomi had stated, I will be talking about the effects of the West Nile virus. There are multiple ways that the West Nile virus can actually have an effect on a person. 8 out of 10 people develop no symptoms. They are asymptomatic to the disease, while 1 in 5 people develop a fever with headaches, body aches, joint pains, vomiting, diarrhea, and or rash. And 1 in 150 people develop more severe symptoms that affect their central nervous system, which includes encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain, or meningitis, which is inflammation of the membranes that surround the brain and the spinal cord, as well as the high fever, neck stiffness, disorientation, coma, tremors, convulsions, muscle weakness, vision loss, numbness, and paralysis. So, although anyone can actually develop these severe symptoms, those who are age 60 and older, and those with pre-existing medical conditions such as cancer, diabetes, kidney disease, tension, and those who have actually received an organ transplant are at a much greater risk. About 1 in 10 people, an estimate of 1 out of 10 people who develop the more severe symptoms that affect the central nervous system, unfortunately, die. So, to actually get the West Nile virus diagnosed, there are a multitude of tests, such as the IgG antibody seroconversion in 2 serial specimens collected at a 1-week interval by ELISA. There's the IgM antibody capture ELISA. There's neutralization assays, viral detection by reverse transcription, polymerase chain reaction assay, and virus isolation and cell culture. IgM can actually be detected in all cerebrospinal fluid and serum specimens received from West Nile virus patients, which is nice. The long-term effects of the West Nile virus are yet to be fully known. However, there has been neurological abnormalities that have been documented. Back in 2002, the Houston West Nile cohort was formed when the West Nile virus actually came to Houston, and they have documented abnormalities of up to 1 year post-infection from the disease. So they reported studies of abnormalities between the 1st and the 3rd year and the 8th and the 11th year after being infected with West Nile virus. 86% with encephalitis, 27% with just a fever, and 36% with meningitis actually had abnormal neurological exams during the first round of testing within the 1st year. And then when they got retested for the neurological abnormalities the second time, 36% with encephalitis, 33% with meningitis, and 57% with just a fever presented new neurological complications. After careful observations, they had noticed those with encephalitis actually were most common to having neurological abnormalities. So, although 80% of people are asymptomatic when infected with West Nile virus, it can still cause a fatal neurological disease in humans. So I'm going to pass it over to Evelyn, who is going to talk about the treatments, if there are any, after being infected with West Nile virus, how to prevent getting infected with West Nile virus, and the risk that happens with West Nile virus. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Evelyn Sanabria, and as Shannon mentioned, I will be going over treatment, prevention, and risks. There are no targeted treatments or vaccines for the West Nile virus. All current treatment options are currently supportive. For the milder symptoms of the virus, such as fever, headaches, body aches, vomiting, and diarrhea, over-the-counter pain relievers, fever reducers, and digestive aids can be used. For the more rare and severe symptoms, such as meningitis, encephalitis, and paralysis, patients will need to seek medical care and be hospitalized to receive more specialized support, such as intravenous fluids, antivirals, and respiratory support. According to the CDC, there have been many case reports and some clinical trials to test various therapies for the use as treatment for West Nile virus. However, none of the treatments or therapies have been approved. Treatments that are provided in the hospital setting are currently experiential. One treatment that has been tested quite a bit, polyclonal immune globulin intravenous, or IgIV, has had mixed results, with some patients recovering and some not. IgIV is described as a sterile solution made from human plasma. It contains antibodies that protect you against infection from various diseases. However, this seems to be the case with all treatments that have been tested. Nothing has shown to be beneficial enough to be approved as treatment for West Nile virus. It is fair to mention that all these studies have been of a small scale, and not all of the results from all of the clinical trials have been published. There have been development for vaccines for non-human hosts and for related viruses. In 2005, a DNA vaccine was approved for use in horses in the United States. There was also a DNA vaccine against Japanese encephalitis virus approved for use in humans in 2010 in Australia. Japanese encephalitis is a related flavivirus, which is also a mosquito-borne virus. DNA vaccines incorporate genes for antigens from a virus or bacteria to stimulate the immune system. This results in both humoral and cellular immunity without the threat of any active disease from the traditional live attenuated vaccines. They work similarly to RNA vaccines, which we're all a little bit more aware of these days. And I'm just going to show a picture showing how a DNA vaccine works. So here we have transfer viral protein gene into a plasmid, deliver plasmid into patient skin or muscle cells, and here patient cells produce viral protein mimicking a viral infection and inducing a strong immune response. The West Nile virus is the most common illness from mosquitoes, from mosquito bites in the United States, as Naomi had previously mentioned. Since we just learned there are no direct treatments or vaccines to treat the virus, the focus on prevention is very important. The CDC suggests using mosquito repellent with the active ingredient DEET, and long sleeve shirts and pants when outside during mosquito season. Limiting time spent outdoors and having screens on windows and doors. Also clearing stagnant water near or around your home that acts as a breeding ground for mosquitoes. Community-wide prevention includes killing adult mosquitoes and larvae with the use of larvicide and adulticide. Blood and organ donations are also screened for West Nile virus. And here I'm just showing a photo with the CDC recommendations of the areas where you might want to pay attention to and remove any stagnant water, which can be a breeding ground for mosquitoes. Let's see. The risk of being infected by the virus in the United States is at its highest during June through September. These are the hotter months of the year, and mosquitoes thrive in warmer weather. The chances of developing severe symptoms from West Nile virus are low. Statistics show that less than 1% of people that are infected with West Nile virus will develop severe symptoms. Most people who do go on to develop severe symptoms or die are typically older and have pre-existing conditions. Here, I'm just showing an older gentleman taking the CDC's advice to protect himself with mosquito repellent.